Now, let us take a look onto the built-in control flow. We will quickly take a look onto an example code for Angular less than 17, which means here you see a code example that using the ngIf with a variable named logged in, and inside of the ngIf also an else anonymous user. When logged in is true, the template shows the user is logged in. If logged in is false, this else anonymous user refer to the template that we're defining in line 4. Which means if logged in is false or undefined, if it is falsy, it shows the user is not logged in. So now we come to the changes of Angular 17. You can still use ngIfs, but they now have a new preferred way to make that logic. So what has changed? What I have changed is that you don't need an element, a DOM element that holds your logic. Which means before, as you can see, we had to put the ngIf onto an element, like here a div. There is a lot of logic that using ngContainer with an ngIf, and that made problems because you then have multiple DOM elements that not get rendered by Angular, but it's really hard to then understand what is going on. What they now introduced, as you can see, is this add-if. The add-if is now the replacement of ngIf, and you put the variable or the logic that you have inside of the brackets of it to tell them, okay, if that is true, kind of render the user is logged in. So if that thing is false, we now have the add else, which handles the else case without thinking to create an ng template for it. And yeah, we have now the same logic, but with a more cleaner way. Then we will take a quick look on switch case in templates. Here you can see the ng switch that looking for a variable named access level. And we have two cases. One case is if access level equals to admin, and one for access level equals moderator. And we have an ng switch default, which handles the case if no of that switch cases matching with the variable value. They now have changed that to have also that annotation with the add, which means we still have an add switch now with the variable, the conditioning of the switch, and we have add case with the string comparison for that example admin and moderator, and we have an add default for the default case. As I earlier said, you don't need any wrappers or holders for that logic. All of them is now inside of the template, and you can do whatever you want. Which means, for example, if you want to have multiple elements that get rendered if the case equals to admin, you can now doing it. You can easily putting a new element inside of the curly brackets, and there's no problem. And it's so much easier. Before you needed an ngContainer with the star ng switch case, and in that container you then putting your multiple elements. And you now can do it without having a DOM element that holds your logic. Lastly, we take a look onto the loop-in template. Here you can see a basic ng4 implementation. It looks through all users, go with every user inside of this div, and will render the name of the user. What happens here is that this for kind of copying this div element where it is placed on, and then kind of make a div element array of it and render it next to each other. Or like because of a div, it will be one below the other. Yeah. And what has changed now? They now have this add for, which means you now have, same as the other examples, the logic inside of this brackets. Here I extended the example a little bit with this track user.id. That's now like a default behavior that you explain to Angular which ID it can remember if you're changing, for example, this users list, because then the DOM rendering get faster because it knows that this user is already in the DOM. It don't have to re-render what you have put it inside of the curly brackets, and it can remember it and can say, okay, I already have that user. I don't have to create any elements. I only changing what is inside of the curly brackets and not recreating this element. Ready to learn Angular 19, 20 and 21. This course covers everything new in this latest versions. From hydration, event replay, resource API, signal forms, we cover it all. You will get a complete playground app showcasing all features. Plus, we will build a weather app from scratch to implement everything hands-on. Full source code for both projects included. Check the link in the description.